a case that's come before the High Court brought by the Criminal Assets Bureau against a Longford organised crime gang. It really shows, I suppose, the reality of rural drug dealing gangs, how much money they can make, and just what sort of impact they have in the community. You were there, obviously, through a number of these hearings into, I think, what's called the, is there a name specifically given to the gang?
Well, there was, but it was a very long-winded one. There was four surnames in it, so it's just easier to call them. Like they were called the Dinnegan Stokes, the Dinnegan Stokes Keenan, and somebody else.
Ward,
gang,
I think.
Ward gang, yeah. So there was it wasn't a snappy.
Wasn't
Bugsy
designed.
Malone's or anything like that. You know, it wasn't really a catchy one. It was very much a designation by the guards. But I mean, they're a Longford organised crime group involved in the sale and supply of all sorts of drugs in Longford town and the surrounding region, and members of this particular gang have been at it for decades. And I think what was revealed, I suppose, was such a kind of, a family clan involved. So the four fellas named in the case, along with their four wives, so it was basically four couples, but the women are all sisters.
And they're all the daughters of a guy called Willie Stokes Senior.
That's right. Yeah. And he's been regarded as a serious drug dealer in the town for years. And it's everything from cocaine, ecstasy, cannabis, heroin being sold by various members of the gang. Interestingly enough, I suppose from the criminal assets point of view and from the community's point of view, is that it was a local profiler that kicked off the case and brought the attention to the main, I suppose, bureau, who then launched their own investigation. And it would have been well before, if anyone remembers, this viral video of a man being run over by a van during a disturbance in Ardnacassa estate in Longford. So this is where they're all based, in this estate, Ardnacassa. And again, one of the main characters in this case, Jamie Dinnegan, he was jailed. I think he got 18 months he pleaded guilty to a fray. For his part, he basically fired 4 shots from a shotgun at one of the rivals, who are now known as kind of the Keenan faction. So you would have had 2 brothers that were named in the cab case, Thomas and Martin Keenan. We'll kind of go into one of them a bit more later on, and the other gentleman was Lawrence Ward, and again, they were kind of, it was pointed out, some of them have they have a long history of dealing drugs in the town.
So I mean, like, basically what's described in it, and CAB, like, they build these cases, and as part of this case, they obviously look at the money that's there, the assets that these people have, but then they lay out affidavits, which are sort of signed documents, where they give a kind of a background and a story of an explanation based on, obviously, various information that they have, maybe from confidential sources, but also from court cases that have gone up over the years, other bits of information they've had, and they build this picture. It's really a picture over 2 decades, isn't it, that they build up. And it is remarkable that there's these 4 sisters and all of their 4 husbands are part of this case. And obviously then in Longford, like, it's a big town, but you're not head of Gotham City crime gang. It's a rural area, but they have managed to amass, decent sized assets and spend quite a lot of money.
Yeah, certainly in the case of Jamie Dinnegan, there was evidence of €10,000 being spent on a 3-diamond platinum ring. There was trips to Lourdes. There was cosmetic surgery in Turkey. There was, the purchase of a Ford Ranger, other vehicles, an Audi, a Mercedes. Now, not all of these were necessarily on the schedule of property that the Criminal Assets Bureau were after, but all these transactions were put into the case to show that they were living a lifestyle. And that, there was more to than just what they had. I mean, the house itself, in their case, I think that the total price they paid for it was that it went for was around 24,000, and that there was nearly 10 times that then put into refurbishments. And they were interviewed about this. So there was kind of a page found in the house during one of the searches, and there was a whole series of all the different works that had been carried out and how much they cost. And they insisted that this was a wish list. This is what herself would do if she had the money to spend on it, and that they never actually spent that money. But of course, the Criminal Assets Bureau in these cases, they always get their own valuers to go in and make an estimate of how much is spent, and they do a kind of they do this lifestyle analysis as well. So they figure out that in their case, in the 7 years that they were looking at, they would have had unexplained income of, I think, 455,000 or so around that. And it worked out just under 60 grand a year of unexplained income. And this is on the basis of what they found and where they'd spent their money and, the various kind of, I suppose, outputs. Plus,
which are visible things like holidays, obviously, and clothing and cars. And obviously that can't even track the day-to-day spending on food and entertainment and stuff like that.
Yeah, and with the lifestyle analysis, they kind of go, that's where the social welfare officers who always stay anonymous, they're part of the Criminal Access Bureau as well. And they will go through what individuals have claimed. Now, I suppose Jamie Dinnegan was very much trying to say that, the money that was found, including 18,000 in I think it was something like 15,000 in cash and another 2.5 grand in his wallet and some other money lying around, and totaling 18,000 was his life savings, which he'd saved from social welfare payments, gambling, and buying and selling the odd car. It's the same kind of excuses that we've heard before in this type of drug dealer. People at this level, I mean, they're basically one step ahead, and they're just they're one step away from the actual street. But they're far from being a Mr. Big or being up there with the Ross Brownings or anything like that. They're a good bit down the. They're not.
They're not going to be buying any property in Dubai. And
at best they're middle management, I guess. I suppose if you're talking about them in corporate structure.
And there was obviously phone seized from Dinnegan's house as well, and that kind of showed, I suppose, how the drug business was operated, didn't it? Some of the messages on that.
Yeah, I mean, they seized a number of phones, and they were using that Cellbrite software, I think, to crack one of the I think it was a Samsung 9, and there was also an iPhone, and they were able to get a certain amount of WhatsApp messages off of one of them. Now they said that it only offered a glimpse into the carrying ons or the dealings that were going on, and some of it was relatively low level. It was people trying to do a deal. Jamie Dinnegan trying to do a deal. I think €5,500 worth of pills. I was going to throw in a clocked Ford Mondeo as part of as a sweetener to pay for some of this. And there was people coming back saying, "Oh, I'm low at the minute, but we'll buy more off you next month or next week, or we don't really have that kind of money at the minute." And then some of the other phones that were taken from some of the other individuals, they were talking about, well, you're not getting any more till you pay the 100 you already owe me. So you're talking about, down to that level.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose the other side of it is that, there has been all that kind of violence that has plagued Longford, and certainly for the last 10 plus years that, we've written so many different stories. Now, I'm not saying every single act of violence is to do with drug dealing in Longford, but the corrosive effect of these guys being able to, do what they want to some extent because they have the money behind them.
Yeah, and also they have the sort of the kudos of being involved in the drugs business and maybe whatever connections they have. So all of these things have, Longford traditionally back in the day would not have seen anything like the level of violence. I mean, if you're talking back in the 1990s or whatever, I'm sure there's the odd incident, but it's been a constant stream of sort of feuding going on, and some very, very dangerous incidents. And there have been, obviously there's a range of different people involved, not saying all these are connected with this organisation, but there have been numerous shootings and non-fatal.
But even in this case, we kind of got a little snapshot of how this works, in that, the whole incident where Jamie Dinnegan was run over by a van, again, that's the viral video I was talking about, like that started because somebody wouldn't stand in for a photograph on New Year's Eve in 2021, and then the incident with the van happened in 22. And in the evidence there that the one of the guards was giving to the High Court case was saying that it started as a feud, as a family row between a group, and now they split, and it's turned into now a territorial dispute between two drug gangs, and they were expressing serious fears that there have been threats made and that they'll still be carried out. The driver of the van himself, he was also convicted of careless driving causing harm, and he's awaiting sentence. But there's fear now that he could be the target of revenge attacks, and this is all stated in the affidavits.
Yeah,
and very specifically who made the threats and so on. And it's kind of so it's evolved from being this I presume a row at a party.
Yeah,
and has become this crazy, wild and reckless a shooting incident, someone had been run over. So I mean, the idea of ordinary people living, it's a big estate. I've been there in the past, and it's a big estate. I think it was built at that, pretty much at the height of the Celtic Tiger, and I think people who got mortgages who probably shouldn't have, ended up abandoning some of the houses, and there was quite a number of houses abandoned. And I think in this case, some of the houses that the cab were after in this case were actually ones that this group had bought at a very low price.
You're talking tiny values.
Yeah,
one bought for 5,000.
Yeah, 5,000 and 10,000, and then but putting in hundreds of thousands in doing them up. And they actually, when you go up there, they do stand out. It's pretty obvious which house is which.
Yeah.
But I mean, the corrosive effect that they have on people is shocking, And I mean, there's even Lawrence, who's one of the men named in this. He was actually elected as chairman of the Residents Association, and it says in the affidavit again that was basically because none of the ordinary residents went to the meeting because they already knew about his criminal background and didn't want to participate in this, and basically extended members of his family just voted him in.
Yeah. Now we heard some of their success. If you want to put it that terms, possibly attracted the wrong people, namely Nathan Kinsella and Alan Ryan in 2011. Alan Ryan was the leader of the Dublin Brigade of the Real IRA and probably the most feared figure in the criminal underworld. That was a sort of interesting snapshot.
I suppose you can't really understate just how kind of fearsome, I suppose, the reputation of Alan Ryan was at that time. But yeah, I mean, so he turned up at Thomas Oliver Keenan's house, and there was an alleged false imprisonment, is the way it's put in the affidavits in 2011. And the guards are saying that was believed to be a drug debt owed to Republican figures. And it goes on to mention that there was 4 men arrested as a result of this investigation. And one of those was Nathan Kinsella. They were all released without charge, but Nathan Kinsella was held on to because there was warrants outstanding for some other reason. And that he appeared in court then, and Alan Ryan was with him at the time, and the two of them were seen speaking then to Thomas Oliver Keenan after that. And this is all put in kind of, I suppose, by way of background to show, the Keenan's links to criminality, are serious, as well as his own kind of convictions that he has as well.
Yeah, I mean, he was described, as one of the first significant suppliers of drugs into the area.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly a kind of a title that you really want to earn, but he was described as like the first significant drug dealer in Longford.
Yeah.
And they talked about, a number of times people coming from his house being stopped and searched with, small amounts of heroin. So he's suspected of being like, a serious heroin supplier in the town to people, I guess, at the bottom of the pecking order in that sense.
So who exactly are the 4 names? Because they obviously the partners, the women in this case, they're not convicted of any criminal offence. They're not suspected of direct involvement in criminality. I think all it says about them that they had a knowledge of what was going on, but that they're not participants. It makes clear.
Yeah. I think the quote from one of the investigating officers was that I say his daughters are all aware of the family's drugs network and assist in the enterprise. So, I mean, even if you're just lodging cash into a credit union account, like you're effectively money laundering. So there's all that.
Yeah.
Some of them do have criminal convictions, but I won't necessarily go into which one do and all the rest for various reasons. But just to go through, so you have Jamie Dinnegan and his wife Teresa. And then the other 3 couples were Martin Keenan and Lena Keenan, then Lawrence Ward and Geraldine Ward, and then the gentleman we were just speaking about, Thomas Oliver Keenan and his wife Bernadette Keenan.
And they're all those 4 women are the daughters of
William Stokes Sr. Yeah.
And what do they describe about him? Do they?
He's regarded as the leading member and directing force of the Keenan Stokes Dinnegan Ward OCG, specialising in the sale and supply of controlled drugs. So I suppose it's a second generation dealers, at work at this stage, and this is where the money come from, and this is how they do business. But I mean, it really gives you a kind of an insight, into how these kind of provincial drug gangs work. Where they get to the point that they're attracting the attention of the Criminal Assets Bureau. I mean, it's if you're driving around in a 181 Ford Ranger, which aren't cheap, you really are going to attract attention. And I suppose that the swagger and the arrogance is going to run people up the wrong way. And the fact that they're all living on social welfare doesn't help either. I mean, one of the women, it's been found that she was overpaid $250,000 in social welfare payments, none of which has been paid back at this stage.
Yeah. So Jamie Dinnegan is now currently behind bars. Like that feud, is it ongoing, or do we know if it's sort of dampened down now?
Well, it's dampened down, I'd say, up until this week because they were still before the courts.
That's right.
And I suppose it'll stay relatively dampened while there's two people at the moment serving time in direct connection with that. Plus, I suppose the effect of the CAB settlement is going to have on them as well. Now, the details of the terms of the settlement weren't agreed, but in 3 of the couple's cases, not Jamie Dinnegan and Teresa Dinnegan, but in the other 3, they were adjourned till dates in 2028 and 2029, which I'm told usually means, I don't know, I don't have the specifics of their settlement, but it usually means that it involves some form of stage payments in return for being able to keep certain assets or not moving on them straight away. Whereas the fact that Jamie Dinnegan's case has been settled and there was no kind of adjournment to a later date suggests that my guess is that he pretty much lost everything. Everything that the guards went after, everything that the Criminal Assets Bureau went after has basically been surrendered or will be surrendered.
Yeah, because obviously people can mix legitimate and illegitimate income, I suppose, in some of these CAB cases. So somebody might buy a house, but they could possibly show that they bought 10% of the house with legitimate income, and then they are allowed to recover that, aren't they? That tends to be the way. I mean, I know it's very complicated.
Yeah, no, we've seen that in a couple of cases. I mean, I suppose the obvious one was Julie Conway and her husband. This is the mother of Ross Browning, and they had borrowed, I think, 40,000 from the Garda Credit Union. And there was a value on Chestnut Lodge was placed in it, so that Judge Jones made the order that, whenever it was sold, that whatever was judged to be their share from that 40 grand, that they get that money back. And again, we've seen it in the case of Yan Fan, who was basically accused of or alleged of being kind of a grow house manager and operator. She was looking after the accounts. Again, there was a certain amount of money that was judged that there wasn't enough proof. I think it was a substantial enough, €89,000 that would have come from her parents, and that was to go back to her parents. And there was a certain amount of her designer goods that were clearly, her own or valueless. So I mean, they are fair in that sense. And I mean, I know there was another case as well where it was actually in the case of Blondie Stokes where there was a certain amount of money put in and into one of the assets. And the judge decided, there was a direct link between that and I think it was around €9,000 from a compensation claim that his wife had been awarded. And he said, that's clearly, this money has come straight from the insurance company, went into that, and that should go back to her. So, I mean, if there's a clear link, like between, a payment of compensation or some kind of legitimate sale of a camper van or whatever, he will include that. But generally, you can't say that if you're living on social welfare and you have a €50,000 compo claim paid to you, you can't say 5 years later you still have it. And that's why the 50 grand was in
exactly, or that you saved every penny of your dole and haven't bought any food in 5 years, obviously, which has always been one of the great traditional excuses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure how you would dodge a cab when they go after you if you keep all your assets in this country. I mean, I think you'd really want to be just, you'd want to have a very good front company, pay yourself a legitimate wage, pay your tax, use that bank card, do everything. Every time you go buy a pint, buy a packet of cigarettes, anything you do it on your card, so you don't been using cash. And then your legitimate cash goes off in a suitcase somewhere.
I'll have to
somewhere nice and sunny.
I'll bear. This is good tips for criminals from Eamon Dillon. Could be what do they call it? An offshoot podcast.
Uncle Eamon, agony aunt for gangsters trying to hide their ill-gotten gains.
How to hide your assets. Okay, well, we'll think about that. Thanks very much, Eamon.
It's always a pleasure, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.